Morning, gents. We are running obviously a little bit late after that extra long assembly, but with us today we've got Rob Vickery. It's a little bit more of a casual, more interactive session than perhaps the last ones. There's no sort of formal PowerPoints and presentations. He is going to speak to you to begin with about startups and investment. We did some research on you yesterday, so we know exactly what you're all about. So he is going to give you some information in that space. And then obviously we can start to fire some of those questions at him. He may answer some of those questions we came up with yesterday, and that's perfectly fine as well. So I will pass over to you. So we will go till lunchtime. Okay, you won't lose your lunch, don't panic. And if you've got questions, I'm sure Rob can stick around, or we can fire them off to him at a later date.
Totally.
Okay.
Good.
Right.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me as well. So I'm Rob Vickery. I'm originally from the UK, and I've been in New Zealand for 3.5 years, got two young boys and they might come to this school one day, so I'm glad to be here and glad to help you guys. I've got a whole bunch of things in my head that I can share with you about what is venture capital, what I do, what it means, how it works, why people might want it, all of that kind of stuff. So I can do all of that, but what would you like to know? If I was to ask you, if there were three things that you wanted to pull out from this today, what would it be? Feel free to throw them out.
Some really good questions yesterday, so maybe who thinks? Everyone's a little shy now.
Yes.
How did you get started in the business world?
Yep, I'm going to just write this up so I don't forget, because I've got terrible ADHD, so I will forget these things. So how did I get started? Yep, okay. Yep, anything else?
Dan?
Mine's pretty similar to Thomas, but like, what did you do after high school?
High school, oh yeah, okay, I'll cover that off. Yeah, no worries.
Yep.
What is it?
What was your first business and what did you learn from that business? What was the key thing you took away?
Yep,
Great.
easy.
A lot of the questions were about your learnings, your failures, your successes from yesterday. Yeah, good stuff.
Plenty of failings, yeah. Any others? One more.
Do you want to know any more information? There were quite a few about, I'll summarise what you look for in when you're, so one asked about, academic qualifications, the sort of person. What were some of the other questions we asked in that space of, what are you looking for when you invest? Sorry?
Deal breakers when investing.
Yeah, what are deal breakers?
Okay. Yeah, so look for what things that kind of, kill the deal. Yeah, can talk about that. Anything else?
Values of a person or business.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is that, yeah.
Very much. All right, cool. Well, there's enough here to definitely go through from here. All right, so how I got started. So I grew up in a rural part of the UK in the West Country. So Bristol, further than that, Cornwall is my home. I'm a very proud Celtic man. Very proud of that culture. But I grew up in a pretty poor area and I went to a really bad school. Actually, it was the worst school. It was the worst performing school in the entire southwest of the UK, and I went to that school. But it was all good. I learned a lot about the School of Hard Knocks, not so much about university in England. We don't have our high school finishes at 16, and then we go to college. So I went to college. I studied business, media. I'm talking about media, and I studied law. Those are the kind of the three topics I picked up at college. And then I went to uni and I studied my BA honours in business, with major business, minor in marketing. I wanted to learn about how to sell stuff. And so I did that for 4 years, it's a 4-year degree. And then I left and then I went straight into a graduate program for Lloyds Bank. Have you heard of Lloyds Bank? One of the biggest, oldest banks in the world. I was very fortunate. I was one of 150 people that were picked from uni to go and basically do a job there for 2 years, and in those 2 years it's broken up into 4 6-month groups, and you go and work in different departments of the bank so you get a feel for whether you like this or not. So I worked in HR, which was not for me. I worked in procurement, which is another word for buying, when you're buying these pens and you're trying to negotiate the suppliers of these pens down. pretty soulless job too. I worked in marketing, which I really enjoyed, and then finally I ended up in a new field that I really encourage you all to think about, which is data science. Heard of that? Yeah, programming, data science. That's my bag. So I found that was my strength, and it wasn't called data science then. This was 2006. It was called customer insight. Quite boring. It's a much more sexy title now, data scientist. That's much better than customer insight manager. But that's what I did. I earned not much. My salary was £35,000 a year. And yeah, it was basically, that was my first graduate experience. So really cool. A bit like doing a degree for 2 years on top of the degree I just finished. Amazing experience. And then I was very lucky that I did quite well through that process. So a lot of people dropped out. This is a bit like a 2-year Dragon's Den. And people were like, I've had enough, this is crazy, I can't do this job's hard. My boss is a total, asshole. I can't deal with him. Sorry for the bad language. But like, yeah, so basically it was like, I survived. And then I got put into a really awesome role, which was, so Lloyds is a 500-year-old bank in the UK, so just to get your mind around that. So in the UK, we've got 64 million people, and it's divided, and Lloyds has 33% of those as a client. And they've been there probably for hundreds of years from their family. Like, oh, my grandfather was a customer here, I'm going to be a grandfather. And these were typically high net worth individuals. They were typically Anglo-Saxon, not very diverse, to be fair. And kind of like, I suppose, like business type people, middle class to upper class. There's another third of the British population. So when you're in a supermarket, here's the weird thing about the company I work for. If there are 3 people in that line, one of them will definitely have a product. Quite weird for a company, right? I went to work for a business where there's not much growth left. That's because the other third of the British population hates Lloyds. Thinks of them as being elitist, thinks of them as being stuck up, like not representative of the people, expensive. And so then there was a third that didn't really care. And they were like, I'm just into this, I want to get the best product, I want to get the best price, I want something innovative, I want something different. And so the challenge that was given to me, and there was only 4 of us that were picked for this, and we were called then, what you might hear today, called entrepreneurs in residence. So I was turned from being a graduate into an entrepreneur in residence. And my job was to work out how we pick those guys up. And so with my data science experience and my passion for that, I started to look at all the information. And when you think about that, we've got 21 million people's banking information. For a data scientist, that's like a dream. I now know where you spend money, what you do spend it on, how often you spend it, where you went to school, what your credit rating is like. I have so much data about you. We call that in data science, we call it dimensionality. I have more dimensions than a Dungeons and Dragons dice on you as a customer. I know everything about you. And so I use that to work out how I can get to them. And so our idea, my startup, going back to your question, my first business, was that I decided to white label a 500-year-old bank. What I mean by white label is we took off the name of Lloyds, stripped it right back, and basically went out to brands that we found, that the 21 million people who bank with us, that they like, and who they like to transact with. And so we went to those brands to try and pick up the remaining 33%. And so I turned supermarkets into banks. Heard of Sainsbury's? Big grocery store. We created something called Sainsbury's Bank, which was basically Lloyds underneath, but when you peel back the wrapper, there's Lloyds, but on top of it, it's called Sainsbury's. And so we allowed a supermarket that was selling carrots and apples and nappies and loaves of bread, and we gave them the chance to sell banking products under their name, but it was actually our name. And cut a long story short, it became very successful. So in 3 years, we generated $130 million in revenue. Wow. Team of 11 people. And and I was 26, and I was still earning £35,000 a year. I had no equity in the bank. I was working 60 hours a week. I was doing really cool things like going and hanging out with the CEO of Lloyd's and going to the Victoria and Albert Hall and meeting with like the upper echelon of British business, but I still earned £35,000 a year, and I generated $130 million in revenue for the bank that didn't reward me for it. Let's just be honest. So after that period, I was like, no, I'm done. I want to go and do something else. And so they sent me to Los Angeles. So I moved to run North America for Lloyd's Bank, and so I lived in LA for 10 years. When I moved there, I was running the bank, and we were doing all sorts of investments, but we also had some really cool clients. And one of those clients was a very famous rock music family office. You know what family office is? When you're really rich, you basically have to run your money like a business. And you turn that into something called a family office, where you've got $100 million of money. You have to kind of treat that like its own business. And so I was running that for a very famous musicians. Now, I don't know, I'm not sure how old you guys are kind of young, but have you heard of a band called Eurythmics?
Yes.
Yeah. So I worked with Dave Stewart and Annie Lennox. They were my boss, which is kind of cool. So I left Lloyd's. I went to work with them full time, and this goes on to my my first like set of like investments, right? And so they gave me this incredible opportunity. Like, here's $20 million, Rob. Go and spend it on startups. I was like, yep, I'm in. And I had an office on Hollywood Boulevard. It was my mentors during that time, and I'm not name dropping for you guys. I don't think of that because this is New Zealand. We don't do that in New Zealand. But my mentor was Mick Jagger. I got to spend out with Ringo Starr from the Beatles, Damian Marley from Bob Marley's son, people like that, real random types. And anyway, when I was doing that, I had all these entrepreneurs come and pitch us. And so this guy turns up. He was from Scandinavia, and he's like, "Look, I really want to work with you guys. I know you guys are like rock music royalty. I'm building this app, and this app is all about allowing people to listen to music for free. Unlike iTunes back in the day, you had to spend, quite a lot of money to have a subscription. We were like, look, you listen to some ads, download this app, it's all good." And I was like, okay, cool. I said, so how many paid users have you got? Because he had a free thing where you listen to ads, or you paid for it and you didn't have ads. And I was like, how many paid users have you got? None. And I was like, okay. How many free users? How many free users have you got? I've got 11 million. And I was like, cool. What's the valuation of the business? We'll talk about that in a minute. And it was pretty low. Can't tell you because it would be a bit naughty to do that, but it was pretty low. And I was like, all right, we're in. We'll give you 50 grand, and I want these guys to get some free equity in your business for being an ambassador for your company. That turned into Spotify. Yeah, so that became a big winner for me. That company, well, for them, that company went on the stock market and listed for $11 billion. So, yeah. So I got to experience a guy called Daniel Ek, who, if you ever want to read about an entrepreneur, that's the guy who pitched me, the guy from Scandinavia. And so I learned a lot from that kind of experience I had, and that's what taught me a lot about what I do today. Now, the other side of that, working with famous musicians who were working with other famous musicians, like we had, who are those idiots from One Direction? What's his name? Harry Styles. So he would come in and hang around, and we'd be working with them on recording stuff and all this. So I spent a lot of time learning about what we call talent management, which is pretty much 80% of my job. Is I don't look after famous musicians anymore. Now I look after very bright, amazingly brilliant entrepreneurs who do really cool things with code. That's what I do now. They're very similar to artists, like coders, people who create games, AI people. They're about that far away from guitarists and rappers. Like, they're all geniuses. Like, musicians, particularly guitarists, are very mathematically minded and just, yeah. I'm rambling, but you can stop me at any point. But this is my story, I suppose. And I made some investments that didn't work with the Eurythmics family. I invested into Magically. Not a good move. That one was a complete bummer. I'm not sure if you followed that company, but They raised $2.4 billion to build an augmented reality headset that didn't work. I was part of the team that put money into that. So yeah, I mean, nature of my job is you only need one to win, which did with Spotify, one beyond belief. And then the rest of them can all fail, because that's just okay. So, I'm going to stop there. Any questions about any of that stuff? We can talk about celebrities if you want. I'm not going to answer questions about Harry Styles. But, if there's anything you want to talk about that side of things, that's where I was as an employee. That's when my career stopped. And then when I went on to being an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Were they still paying you like salary, or was it commission based work?
Oh, I never got commission. Yeah, I got paid good salary with the music family. Yeah, I was on about $200,000 a year. Yeah, and I used to have a limo pick me up for work. Weird. I get to do things that you can imagine. I don't know. I was playing bongos with Andy Garcia at the Hollywood Bowl once. It's just weird stuff that you just can't do. Yeah. Yeah.
How much do you think, like, your network helped bring you to that stage, or to sort of start your career? Because it seemed like the
Great
noise,
question.
and then you got to the music, and then
I had no network at Lloyd's. I was an employee. I didn't know what networking was then. It was weird. I built a really good startup, but I didn't have to raise money for it because the bank paid for it. So that experience actually was useful, but not so useful because I didn't do any networking. When I got to Los Angeles in North America, that's what Americans are amazing at. That's their superpower, is public speaking and networking. And so I built my network then. And ever since then, my network is the most valuable asset I have, by bar none. Without that network, I wouldn't be here talking to you today.
So how did you break in with the Americans? Because you're not American.
No.
And you're very,
I'm very British. Yeah.
they're very American.
Yes.
They're not open. Yeah, how did you?
You'd be surprised they are open, but they are. They don't like humility. So that's the biggest challenge we have in New Zealand, right? And I think it's our biggest advantage is that we are humble, we are conservative, we are a little bit more chill. Over there, there's no humility. It's like, I'm this, I'm amazing, and here's why, and give me money. And so that's kind of how it works over there. So, but because being Kiwi or British, we have a different accent. They love the accent. A British accent and the Kiwi accent, Australian accent, crushes it over there. And they're like, oh, you must be smart because you're from there. Doesn't mean anything. But so that did help. Being British, being international helped a lot with Americans. Bearing in mind, 65% of Americans don't even have a passport. They don't even leave their country, as you can tell by looking at their political system.
50% of them don't know what a mortgage is. Sorry, I split that.
Yeah.
It was a stat
And
the other
40%
day.
of them believe that chocolate milk comes from brown
Chocolate
cows.
brown cows.
Yeah. And 52% of them voted for Donald Trump. Anyway, that's another topic we talk about another time. So yeah, I was there in 2010. I worked as an employee until 2013, and then I left. And because I loved what I was doing, but it was too crazy for me. This whole Hollywood thing was just like, it was too weird. I'm not a drinker. I'm not really into doing anything naughty and stuff like that. There was a lot of that going on in the music business, so I'm out of that. And so I launched my own venture fund. So, what is a venture fund? Before we dive into that part of the story, go for it. Tell me what you think a venture fund is. Yes.
Is it a bit like, is it like sort of like a hedge fund, where a hedge fund does stock market trading and predictions, whereas a venture fund or a venture business does that, but with small businesses?
Yes. Hang on. Pretty much. It's a pool of money that we invest into tiny businesses that are normally just two founders. Unlike hedge funds, you've got you maybe even decades, years of data to be able to decide if this is a good business or not. Good CEOs, sales, all this stuff. With us, we have nothing other than the word of normally two people. And no sales, no employees, no customers, sometimes no products. I funded a company last year with no product, no sales, and just two crazy founders who left a company called Palantir, which is a very successful company. So I went off the back of them. So my job, and so Daniel Eck actually, when he pitched me from Spotify, it was pretty safe because it's got 10 million users. I mean, to turn them into paid ones, you just got to do a couple of things and it worked, right? So yes, so venture fund is that. We have a small pool. Normally when you start, and I'll take you through my journey on that, you have a small pool of money that you say, well, I've got $1 million and I want to make 10 investments from this $1 million. I think 8 of these investments will die, because they probably will. 1 will be giant and the other one will be okay in terms of return. That's what venture fund is. It's very, very speculative. It's very, very high risk. But if you crack it, you make more money than you ever dream of. And so my first fund, because I left obviously crazy world of music, I really wanted to do more of this, but I wanted to finally stop collecting a salary and actually make some of the money that I was making everybody else. And I was like, I want to do this. And so I had to raise money. So like startups, VCs, me, I have to raise money to go into that pool of cash. No one will give me any money, other than one movie director, who, when you come to my office, and you're welcome to come and have a look, you work out who he is, but he directed a film called Alien and Gladiator and all that kind of stuff, and he gave me 50 grand.
You know Ridley Scott?
Yeah, he's one of my first investors, yeah. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for him. Sorry. He's a cool dude. He's a really cool dude. He's a grumpy old British guy, but he's like, I wouldn't be here talking to you today if it wasn't for him. So, as you'll see in my office, he gave me 50 grand, and he gave me the helmet from The Martian. So if you want to have a look, it's in the office in a glass cabinet. You can see it if you want. So he gave me 50 grand, which was very helpful, because nobody else would give me anything. And he gave me that money because I helped him with a couple of things with The Martian. And so he paid me back. I mean, for a guy like that, 50 grand, he gets that in overnight, because he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So this wasn't exactly a big chunk of change for a dude like that, but anyway. So he gave me 50 grand, and I'm like, okay, I can't go anywhere with 50 grand. I put that into Spotify in one deal. I need to get it into at least 5, and no one's going to take $10,000 from me after like me. I need to give more money. So I wasn't rich, so I sold my house in the UK, sold my comic book collection, which was quite valuable at the time, and I pulled together $200,000. So I had 250 grand to invest in this little swag bag of money to invest into startups. I was also at 30 days away from bankruptcy. That was rough. Right. I had no money. And so it was getting pretty gnarly at that time. Now what I did do, I still didn't have enough cash, because I had to spend 50 grand of it on the evil lawyers. Once you're in business now, you'll know how vicious these guys are. But sometimes they're awesome, but then sometimes they just totally pull the wool over your eyes. So I had to spend $50,000 to create the fund and the legal structure and all that, which is not that difficult, but they still managed to con me for 50 grand. I had 200 grand to play with, and I'm like, okay, so I found one company which was augmented reality company. I gave them 100 grand. I really believed in that. Augmented reality. This was back in 2015 when AR was pretty rough. Not like it's pretty rough still today, actually. It hasn't advanced very much. But anyway, I gave an AR company 100 grand. I gave an AI company 50 grand. And I gave, this is crazy, I gave a hologram company 50 grand.
Are you still in the US at this stage?
Still in the US. No salary. There's nothing in there for that, right? And so I put this out there, put it out into the universe. I worked really hard with all these portfolio companies. So my job is not just writing a check and then vanishing. My job is then spending maybe 10 hours a week with these guys, giving them advice on hiring people, firing people, winning business, just doing things that you need to do to grow the business. And I was really lucky, because this one hit the jackpot and was bought by our friendly ghost, Snapchat. and that helps because I was 30 days away from back groups, and so yeah, I'm not one to boast about money, so just take this just as purely a business lesson. But that turned into $1.5 million for me. Solved. Problem solved. Still lost my comic book collection, which I was really pissed off about, but I managed to get some money back. And these ones are still ticking on, actually. Even today, they're still going fine. But I only invest in these things because I knew about them. So even with the hologram, when I was at Lloyd's, one of the projects I funded was the Tupac hologram at Coachella, where he stood up on stage and people thought he was real, right? I financed that thing, so I learned a lot about holograms. So when this startup came to pitch me about holograms, I knew all about that space because I just worked on it. So that was easy. AI, been doing AI for many years because that's basically data science. And then with augmented reality, I'm a really big gamer and I was seeing the future of this and I was thinking about spectacles, I was thinking about the future of Pokemon Go, all these kind of stuff, and I was like, yeah, I'm into that. And so, yeah, that's where it is. So that's how my career started off in venture capital, high risk, high reward. But I was very lucky, because normally you'd have to have a lot more shots like in the gun, right, to get to one exit. But I managed to do it with 3 companies. Any questions about that before I keep going, because I can keep talking? I really like my job, so yes.
With your first 3 investments, were you scared at any point in time that all 3 of them might just like run off with your money?
Every day, yeah. It's the lamb. Well, you get used to it, you get a thick skin, right? But yeah, if I didn't make this work, my career was over. This is like my interview for venture capital. Because there's no degree in VC. And hopefully in a minute I'm going to tell you why this job is so cool and why you all want to do it. But there's no way into this role without basically putting yourself on the line and doing it yourself. So when I put out an application for a few years in the future, it was me and a few others, but actually one of my colleagues put an application for a job for a graduate to join his venture firm. He had 10,000 CVs. But everyone wants this job because it's really cool. I'm not going to tell you why in a minute. But, so that's how it works. You get a question? Yes.
Oh, I see. Well, it was sort of already answered, but what sort of characteristics and sort of the founders, or if you interviewed the founders on those startups, sort of convinced you that they were going to succeed, or what made you think that they were going to succeed?
Great, and that's good timing to move on to the next one. So, what do we look for in founders? So, as I told you, sometimes we've got nothing to go on at all. So, we look for 3 things. We look for why you. We look for why now. And then, why me? Every meeting, every pitch, I've got 2 pitches this afternoon, I have on average 4 a day. Every time I ask myself and I ask the founders these 3 questions. Because this is, we call it the asset, I call it the asset test. But, you know, we'll work it out. So why you? It's probably best answered by like, why are you the best person to do this business? Why are you the most unique person? Why are you the most credible person to do this kind of thing? Why you? Like, because we're funding you as an entrepreneur. Why are you the one, bearing in mind that most startups don't succeed, why are you the one that's going to make this into a unicorn? Because that's what we need unicorns. So we work that out from looking at their, their background, where you've worked before, your education. We look at kind of past startups you might have run. Here's something to tell you. One of my friends runs a VC fund in the US. He won't look at anyone if they haven't had 2 failures before in their startup life, because failure, you learn so much more from failure than you do from success. We don't even call it failure, we call it growth, because that's all it is. So yeah, we look for failures. We want you to fail. And in fact, even people who I funded who have failed and lost me money, I'd rather give them money again because I know how they are and I know why they did it. As long as they failed in a positive way, it wasn't their fault. Well, it's always going to be their fault, right? But as long as they did it in a constructive way, then it's much easier to give someone money you know than you don't. So why you? Biggest question, hardest one to answer, but I have to answer all three of these questions in 30 minutes because that's how long each initial pitch is. Why now is why does your technology, and we're a tech investor, right? So we don't fund. Yeah. No, tech is bad. Yeah. Why does it exist today? As a frontier technology investor, if we were investing in the public markets, we'd be buying stock in SAP, we'd be buying stock in Meta, all these kind of things, right? Easy. But the returns you make on that are very low. We want giant, like 25 times my investment returns. So I need to invest in stuff that can only exist today, like new technology. Or preferably, and the way I best describe my job is to live 3 years in the future. So I want to be funding companies and technology that we'll be using on a regular basis in 3 years' time. It takes that long for your startup to scale, for consumers to love your product, to get value from it. So a lot of the why now, my answer comes from reading, research. I read about 15 journals a day because I have to stay on top of everything that I invest in, and I'll walk through that in a minute. So yeah, why does it exist today? Classic examples of things that make it relevant today are things that were once expensive that are now cheap. When you think about GPUs, think about graphics cards, right? I just bought a new graphics card. I built a new gaming rig. Really excited for this gaming rig. And I bought the NVIDIA GeForce 3090 Ti. Monster. But 10 years ago, that would have been $15,000. I picked it up for $1,500 now. It's cheaper to be able to buy that kind of stuff. You can scale it, you can work with it. Right? So there's that. Then there's changes in what we call the tech stack. So when you think about Uber was launched in 2008, I think. Why do you think Uber answered that question back in 2008? What do you think had changed at that time? I'm giving you a hint in the year. Yes.
I think people are using their phones a lot more.
Yep. What else? What else happened in 2008?
Oh, the financial crisis.
Yep. How do you, when you go somewhere now, how do you find your directions to that location? Google Maps. Yeah. So, in 2008, a unique, I call it a maelstrom, right? A unique storm of things happened that made Uber could only exist that day. That has made it such a successful business. So phones, for sure. You know, people finally migrated from the rubbish flip phone that had very little functionality to the iPhone, which was kind of launched around that time. The GFC created, sadly, millions of people out of work, and the only asset some of them had was a car. Cool. No money, no job, but I got a car. Maps. Google Maps finally created they opened the API. You know what API means? API. So it's basically I don't even tell blank what API stands for. But what it is, it's automatic processing. Anyway, basically they open sourced Google Maps. They allowed anyone to be able to use the Google Map functionality in third-party apps. You take that for granted today, right? When you click on, you order a pizza from Domino's, it says, do you want to track it? Can you share your location with us? Yes, good, cool. That's because the Google Maps API exists and anyone can use that now. So these three things happened. People had phones, people were at work and had a car, Maps was opened up, and Uber was created. It could not have happened before, it could have happened later, but if you look at most of the companies that exist now, Didi, Ola, Lyft in the US, none of them have hit the scale that Uber hit because they cornered the market at the right time. So I'm always trying to find, using this kind of analogy, to find the reasons as to why the company I'm talking to today, why I want to fund them, why should it exist today, not yesterday. Any questions about that? Because there's a lot of detail to that. And I might be boring you. Yes.
When you say it exists today, are you referring to, I know you're a tech venture fund, but do you just refer to tech when you say that, or do you mean to any kind of business?
Yeah, any kind of business. But we also fund consumer products. So we funded a compostable food wrap called Compostic that you might see in the supermarket today. I funded that because it was only at that time that somebody invented a compostable plastic variant. So it can be anything. It's easiest in tech for me to explain. But yeah, when I think about Allbirds, right, Allbirds came about because of the fact that people were realizing that that shoes, I'm wearing them today, typical VC, right? It's all we wear. Because people wanted sustainable shoes and they wanted to find a more environmentally friendly footwear brand. Why me? Why me is like, how can I be the best investor for you? How can I help you? Can I help you? Can we do cool things together? Can I make the investment, the $1 million I give you, can I turn that into 5 million just by introducing you to X, Y, and Z? It goes back to the network question, right? The network for me is so important to me. And so, yeah, this is the last thing I'm thinking about. During that 30 minutes, I'm thinking, are you the right person for this? Is this the right time? And what can I do to help you tomorrow if I was to give you money? And that's it. And then once we've gone beyond that, then it gets a lot more complicated and we look at financials and we look at product roadmaps and visions for the future and stuff that I won't bore you with today, but I'll happily bore you with in the future. But that's the kind of high level of what we look for. So in your startup businesses, think about those three things. Here's another example I used to get a lot in Los Angeles was, I get a lot of people coming to me and saying, in fact, yeah, I'm going to give you an example of why people fail that test. So I had one guy come to me and was like, so I'm building this app, it's for allowing people to book a dog walker. I was like, cool, so what makes you unique? What do you know about dogs? Are you a vet? Are you a dog psychologist? Have you built a dog walking company before? No, none of that. I just think it's cool. It's timely and all that. And I was like, okay. There was about 6 other major popular dog walking apps already at the time in the US, WAG and stuff like that. So the timing was off. He had no credibility for a dog walking app, and I certainly couldn't help him because I have a dog, but I don't know anyone in the dog walking world. So it was an instant like get out. And the company, yeah. And I'm not saying the company didn't work out, but that's not. So that's why those questions are really important, and why they I'll probably tattoo them on my arm when I retire, just so I don't forget. Yeah.
So what's a real deal breaker or red flag?
Um,
Other than the guy clearly not, or if they can't answer those questions, but what else is
yeah.
perhaps not so obvious?
Yeah. Okay. Deal breaker number 1 is lying. Yeah. So we are, when we invest in a company, it's typically a 10-year investment, basically like a marriage. My marriage hopefully will last more than 10 years, but still. If you lie to me and I don't trust you, how do I know that what you're telling me is the truth? And when I'm giving you a huge chunk of money, how do I know that? So if I catch anyone lying to me, it's out the door straight away because and sometimes it's white lies, sometimes it's quite innocent stuff. But like when I was in the US, I had an entrepreneur come and tell me they went to Harvard, and I was like, cool. What did you? Who was your professor at Harvard? And they were like, oh, this and this and this. And then I went on and found out they went to Harvard School. They didn't go to Harvard College. So I was like, so why did you tell me you went to Harvard University? Like, you lied to me. And that's done. And it doesn't matter because this is not a good thing to say in an educational establishment. But generally, the degree you got doesn't really matter. It's the hustle that you have. It's the passion, the relevance. The degree kind of is minor. Most of our founders didn't pass their degree. They dropped out because they had the idea and they wanted to run with it. Like Mark Zuckerberg, like everybody else. Most of the big CEOs in Silicon Valley didn't finish their degree. So lying is the biggest deal breaker, and sorry to be so dramatic about that, but it is like, it's over. The game is over. You lied to me. Other deal breakers are conflicts of interest. Who knows what conflicts of interest is? Yes, sir.
Oh, your interest in what? were you in a tech company or?
Kind of, yeah, kind of. Maybe you got.
Yep. Is it when you have, I think it's a term that lawyers use when their clients have a, I don't want to use conflict, have a an opposing view of a similar case. So for instance, if the lawyer is dealing with a client who directly is related to a business that they are involved in or supporting and that they're suing.
Yeah, yeah, could be that, but yes.
When you try and look at a person kind of objectively, so if the boss was dating an employee and then treated them differently,
It's a conflict of interest, yeah, that's actually really good. You're all right, but in this case, in venture capital, startup land, a conflict of interest is if you come to me and say, right, I'm raising money for this startup, I believe in it, I've got 3 others that I'm doing, by the way, they're not much, but I still do them, right? And so I'm like, okay, so if I give you money for this, I want you to drop those other 3, because I'm not funding the other, I don't like those other 3. And the guy says, no, I'm going to keep it going. I'm like, now, how do you manage that conflict of interest? How about if that one suddenly starts crushing it, and the money I gave you, you've now lost the interest in, and you've gone to do that? Like, that's going to really piss me off, and you're going to ruin my investment. And so conflicts of interest are key. Like, I had one entrepreneur only 2 weeks ago say to me, look, I've got 5 ideas, which one do you like? And I'm like, well, which one do you like? Like, which one do you want to do? Because I'm not going to pick one of your ideas. You should have a passion for one thing and one thing only. And so, conflicts of interest is when you just overcomplicate your life, you've got too many obligations and you can't meet all of them. So, that's probably the big one. To go back to lying, how many of you seen the documentary about Theranos? Yeah. If you haven't, I think you can get it on Neon. Or I think it's on Neon. Or Amazon maybe, Amazon Prime. Watch it. Because Elizabeth Holmes is a really, really interesting kind of criminal, right? She blatantly lied about a product that would apparently take your blood sample and tell you everything about your health. The product just didn't work. Like, it was absolute rubbish. Like, the machine, the box, was pretty much empty. All they were doing was taking the blood sample you gave and then sending it to an external lab that wasn't part of Theranos to give you kind of spurious results. So she raised billions of dollars from people like Henry Kissinger, who was president, second in command of the president. I forget the name of the not deputy president, is it? Anyway, he was like big name guy. Betsy DeVos, another one of the awful Trump era people as well, like millionaires she raised money from, and none of them did any due diligence on whether this thing actually works. And they believed it because she was charismatic, she was funny, she had a beautiful office in Silicon Valley, she started to dress like Steve Jobs with the black roll neck, she got featured on the front of Forbes, everyone was like, this got to be right. And sadly she was completely lying. So, we got to, and she's going to prison now, which is really sad. It's not good. It's very sad. So that's so lying, conflicts. What else is a deal breaker? Probably, this is a real hard one, and it actually goes back to. So another question I want to work out is, are you ready for startup life? How many of you want to do startups? How many want to be investors? Hand up,
What
startups.
to do startups?
Okay.
Who wants to do it best?
Okay, good. So we'll ignore the investors. We'll talk about the startup founders. This is a hard job. Like, it's hard. More likely you're going to fail than succeed. I'm just going to be honest with you. The first time you're around, probably not going to work out. If it does, it's great. If it doesn't, then just pick yourself up and do it again. But it's a hard damn life. You're working long hours, you don't get paid very much money. You often, some people are just in love with the idea of being a startup, the concept of that, the coolness, the sexiness of it, the thing you can go to a bar and say to someone, hey, I'm a startup founder, everyone thinks that's cool, right? I want to work out if that's you, because if that's you, I'm not going to fund you. because you've got to be ready for a punishing schedule, punishing job, where a lot of people are going to say no to you. Like I have an acceptance rate of startups that pitch me of about 99.5% I say no to. I only do 4 investments a year, and I had 1,112 last year pitches. I only did 5 investments last year. So the success rate is really hard, and you have to be able to basically run with it and not be offended by it, not treat it as tool poppy, don't respond with tool poppy, just kind of like own it. It's all good. But equally for me, it's pretty. Don't get your violins out or anything, but like psychologically for me, it took me a couple of years to get used to saying no to everyone who came in the door. And entrepreneurs are generally quite fun people. You want to spend time with them, but the most likely answer I'm going to give you is no and goodbye. And so you just have to get used to that. And as entrepreneurs, you need to be ready for that. I think there's actually here's another one. We look very closely at diversity. We're not interested in funding a whole bunch of white dudes to building a startup. 50% of our founders are women. I don't choose them that way. I don't choose anyone based on gender or ethnicity. I choose people on hustle and their commitment to doing really cool things that matter. And so, yeah, I don't favour people who went to a certain uni over others. I don't really give 2 monkeys about that. I really don't. I just care about your hustle, your passion for the thing. Why you, why now, why us? So diversity is a big reason why we say no. I just gotta like you. You know, like this is a 10-year relationship. If you're an asshole, I'm not gonna like you. So if you come to me with a whole bunch of bravado and blah 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 blah, and it's just like, oh man, you're gonna exhaust me. I don't want to work with you for 10 years. I'm out. And so yeah, and you gotta like me too. You gotta like the fact that I'm a fairly confident dude who's got a lot of mileage under his belt in startup land, and some people don't like that, but that's just the way it is. So yeah, those are the reasons why we don't do deals. Conscious of time, I'm still talking. So any of that makes sense? Anything else that would maybe you might? So let's put yourself in my shoes. Why would you not do an investment?
Oh, it was pretty quick.
I've seen on like Shark Tank and stuff, like sometimes they just say no instantly because they already have an investment that's like similar to the company.
Yep.
So let's say, I don't know, dog tags.
Yep.
They already invested in dog tags, and then someone comes up to them and say, hey, I'm selling dog tags. You can't really
You can't do 2. Yeah, exactly. That's a conflict of interest on my end. Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's actually very valid. Yeah, we don't fund things that we don't. It would be weird for me, and the way VC works is right. We create portfolios. Each fund is a collection of startups. It would be weird to have 2 startups that compete against each other in the same family. It would be counterproductive. So yeah, that's absolutely right. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Probably if you're like uninterested in the idea, like
Yeah. Not a believer. Yeah.
like if you had like a women's makeup company come to you or something, you just have
You never know. I might wear women's makeup.
Well, I'm talking about from my perspective. I probably
No worries.
too much.
I'm pretty mean with a lip liner, but yeah. Okay, not a believer. Yes.
I'd say that personality was.
Yep.
It's only been like a small amount of people who I've ever met who actually seem like they really put in the work, like really are gonna go and do what they say that they're gonna do. And it's
Yep.
cool to meet those people, but it's pretty rare. I always admire them.
Exactly. That's a really good point. What do you think is missing from this that maybe I should add in, or that you might expect me to say? Yes.
The morals of the person.
Yep.
So let's say the person they're running a business, it could be any business regardless of what product or service they're selling.
Yep.
If they seem like their morals aren't straight or that they can do some shifty stuff, kind of goes in line with the lying, like not paying their workers enough. I wouldn't want to be the one backing that.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't
The
either.
name behind it.
You're a VC making. That's a very good point. there's one thing I'm missing from here, and it's probably something that your least favourite subject, maths.
It's all the financials, yeah.
So,
They always get a 9 on those on drinks.
yeah, exactly. By the way, I've been pitched countless Shark Tank, people who pitched me from Shark Tank, and they didn't, all total smoke and mirrors. Rubbish. That show was rubbish. And there was an article by Mark Cuban recently that said that every single one of his Shark Tank investments have gone down the toilet. So watch it, but just know that it's total rubbish. It's not the actual deal you actually get at the end of after the show, and it's just rubbish. Yeah. So, but we do get called Dragon's Den, Shark Tank all the time. Financials. So deal breakers are, and it kind of goes back. So what I'm trying to tell you here, by the way, is most of this is psychology. Pretty much 90% of my decision making is based on psychology. Financials is kind of like the hygiene factor. And have you studied Maslow's hierarchy of needs yet? Okay. Like, I forget the third one. I know the first one. I can't remember the middle one. But like, this one here is called a hygiene factor. Hygiene factors are basically things you need to live, the very basics of you doing something: water, food, money. This one up here is called self-actualization, and this is the big stuff, like your dreams, your goals, what drives you, the things that completes you, right? When I think about psychology, I'm not interested. The financials are your hygiene factors. This stuff is all the self-actualization stuff I need to work out, right? Hygiene factors, and that goes back to how you run your business, the financial health of your business, like your BMI test. That's basically how I look at financials. And most of the time with startups, particularly when I'm investing in what we call pre-seed, and I'll go through the stages in a minute if we've got time, but pre-seed is pre-product, pre-revenue, pre-everything. Just two people with an idea. There isn't no financials. So they come to me with a set of 5-year financials, and I'm like, next. This is all total rubbish, right? It's all fictitious. It's got no grounding in reality at all, because we don't know how this thing's going to work out. So most of the time, that's why I put financials into the hygiene sector. If we are looking at a company that's 2 years old, that's got revenue, that's spent money, it's raised money before, then it's important. And then we look at things like how they've spent money, where it's gone. We call it, well, if they're raising $1 million, I want to know how they're going to spend it. And we call that use of proceeds. Probably the one I spend the most time on is, right, I'm going to give you $1 million. How are you going to do it? What are you going to do with it? What's it going to accomplish for you to do that? If you hire 5 salespeople, what are they going to do for revenue? If you're going to use it for product development, what does that do? So I spend a lot of time more thinking about how you're going to spend the cash and how it's going to improve the value of the business. There you go. That's deal breakers. They're everywhere. And for me to turn away, thousands of deals, that's because we've got a very tight filter on things that make deals not work. And these are the big ones.
We've got 5 minutes left before the bell goes. Sorry guys, we got cut short with the extra long assembly. For me, with 5 minutes to go, what's the piece of advice you'd give my young entrepreneurs in here on their startup journey? Some of them are 2-3 deep, but all of them it's the beginning of it. I've got another, sort of set waiting in the wings for next year. What's the one key piece of advice you'd give them at this stage?
I would just have one called KYC, which is Know Your Customer. With that then, if you don't know who you're selling to, why you're selling to them, what they want, what's the point? Uber was selling to people who were upset with taxis because they hated the way the taxis ran, no credit cards, dodgy drivers, bad stuff happening in the back of the cab, stuff like that. So Uber knew their customer, they knew what they wanted. And so for you guys, if you don't know who you're selling to, and then that's not easily identifiable within your product look and feel, vision, marketing message, financial model, everything, then just don't bother. too many people build startups. They start with, how many of you seen Jurassic Park?
Yeah.
Great line in Jurassic Park, which is from Dr. Ian Malcolm, when they're looking at the raptor coming out of the egg, and he says, no, this is the dinner actually, after the raptor comes out of the egg, and he says, just because you could, you didn't think about whether you should. And so, use that, I think about that a lot. That line, it's a great movie, but also I just think it's a cool line. Just because you can build an app for teenagers to play more video games per hour, or just because you can build a dog walking company, doesn't mean you should. And it all comes back to who you're selling to, what do they want, how much can you charge them, how much will they pay for it, all that kind of stuff. That would be the only thing I'd say. Yeah.
It's probably got time for a couple of questions, a couple of burning questions from anybody from the list we came up with. You say that you don't feel we've answered, or you'd really like
This
to.
isn't really like related, but did you say you got a GTX or RTX graphics card?
I got the new GTX.
Why not the RTX?
I don't know, man. Maybe it's the RTX.
Okay, while we're sorting that out,
It's really nice.
any other questions before we break? Oh. Follow.
Are there any similarities with the companies that did succeed and didn't succeed? Or like,
Yeah, most of them just hadn't found. I mean, this kind of goes off the back of this, right? But startups pursue something called PMF, which is, what do you think it stands for? It's like 101 of startups. It stands for product, market, fit. Most of them did not work that out. Or there wasn't there. The product didn't have a market fit because they didn't know their customer. And that's not like bad behavior. It's not someone's lazy. It's not because of anything. It's just like, the cards didn't fall in your favor and people didn't want your product. I actually had a company fail on me 3 months ago because they didn't find product market fit. It's okay. Yeah.
Are there any tips you have on like human resources or managing employees?
Any thoughts on that?
Or tips?
Tips?
Or like major things you think?
Oh.
It's the hardest thing ever.
HR, man, that'll be a whole nother session. I haven't touched that this year.
I've only got 2 employees and I'm rubbish at managing them, so I just tend to find people who are brilliant, hardworking, and don't. I'm not a micromanager. People who you point them in the direction and they can get off and do it. If I find someone like that, then you're going to be fine. Yeah.
Did you say it was tougher investing for someone else or investing for yourself? Like handling the pressure of someone else's money, or like having to accept the fact that your money could go down the drain? What was harder for you?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a big one. They're both pretty similar, to be honest, because both of the time my career was on the line, right?
Yeah.
So maybe it was actually easier investing my own money because then I had no one else to blame me, other than Ricky Scott. He's not a very happy man when you do the wrong thing.
Last one from Dan, and then we'll.
You mentioned how you didn't really care about the universities and stuff people went to,
Yeah.
like who you were going to invest in. But how did you find, because you did a degree in business, is that right?
Yeah.
How did you find that affected your business career?
It was just one question during an interview for Lloyd's, and after that, no one ever cared.
Okay.
Just like, it was a hygiene factor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying that to you guys. No.
I'll say this, as an educator, a degree, do you know what a degree does? A degree says to someone you can learn. A degree also says that you've been out of home and school for a few years and you've done something with it, but that's not just the be all end all. I don't believe, even as an educator, you need to go to university. And we've had lots of people, you've got to do what's right for you. No one's going to be able to stand up here and give you a magic bullet. Rob can't, I can't, none of the speakers. Everyone's had a different experience. You need to try out for you what's right. Don't let anyone pressure you into going to uni, not going to uni, or whatever. Rob, it's a shame we've had to cut the session short. The bell has gone. I'm sure, are you able, I know you've got a couple of meetings this afternoon, stick around for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I can hang around.
Huge big thank you from me for coming in and just sort of, you'll be the last one in our speaker series for Openground for this year, so I think that was a really cool way of ending it. Lots and lots of questions. And I'm sure if you can't get a question answered by Rob this afternoon, he'd absolutely be happy to help. He's going to help me with some planning for the program a little bit later in the year. I'm just going to hand over to Polo. Polo's going to have the last word today.
Sweet. Yeah, on behalf of Wesley Openground, I just want to say thank you for teaching us this ins and outs of the startup world and sharing your story.
Thank you very much.